Welcome to another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, bringing you another Saturday interview, a very special interview with a guy I have been a huge fan of since I can remember. Let's welcome him to the show, Tony Carey. Tony, how are you?
Great. Good morning. Do you realize how much your voice changed from our pre-interview conversation to your hello?
I feel like I have to
You do that pretty well.
Thank you. I feel like I have to just like jazz up the beginning of the show because the conversation is going to be interesting enough, you know.
Hell yes.
So I got to ask you first, you know, you've lived in America, you were born here, and now you're living in Germany. And I think we have this very romanticized idea of what Germany is like around Christmas time. What is the reality of Germany at Christmas time?
Very romantic. I live in a little village, and I have adult children in big cities, Munich and Berlin. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's a winter wonderland, and in the South, it's a white Christmas always, and mm-hmm. They have these old-fashioned. Yesterday, my wife and me, we went down and got a Christmas tree at an open-air market, and most of the village was there, drinking, Christmas punch and eating bratwurst and buying trees, and basically a social event. But the real romantic, it's really romantic, old-fashioned, traditional Christmas here.
I just imagine walking outside and smelling the chocolate from the patisseries and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I live on the Rhine River, which is about a mile that way. And if you get on a boat and just head south on the Rhine's a really major artery, and it has been historically really important here. There were popes in the big town next to me. It was a papal center about 1,000 years ago, and big history. But the whole Rhine River is castles, 1,500-year-old castles or 800-year-old castles, and all ruins, and it's just fabulous. I mean, it's romantic as hell. Somebody wrote me once, they were in Australia, a cousin of mine. She said, man, I just saw, we were just in a building that's 149 years old,
Wow.
And this is a Californian. What do they know about old? And
exactly.
I said, man, I'd love to take her on a Rhine cruise and show her some knights in armor castles.
I don't know how many puzzles I've done of the Neuschwanstein Castle, probably at least 5 or 6 over the years.
Neuschwanstein.
Yeah,
of
course I'm going to pronounce that wrong.
It's in Bavaria. It was built by the mad King Ludwig, who drowned in the Lake Starnberg, where our studio is. Oh, wow. And so he's like a big theme. And you know how it is. It's on that mountain on the top. You got to wonder how they got the building, and it's so beautiful. I've been there a couple of times. You can take a tour, and it's amazingly, they keep it up. It's not any kind of ruin or anything. It's just clean. And it reminds you most of a cathedral, like a Gothic cathedral. It's fabulous. And I guess Walt Disney liked it enough to steal a design for the Disneyland castle.
Well, and no one would build that today. They would just say, well, we can't get materials up there. It's too costly. It's too difficult, But boy, they sure did it when they didn't have the technology.
You bet. And they didn't have the money either. This crazy King Ludwig bankrupted Bavaria, actually.
Oh, wow.
It was a big scandal. And he was in all kinds of trouble the whole time. The Mad King. Yeah. And all that's all romantic as hell. I love all that stuff. And but no, today they build something anywhere they want, but it would be steel and glass, just like just one of these horrors that are popping up in the Middle East and everywhere.
I've never been to Germany, but my grandmother was born in Bonn, and I think she lived most of her time there in Dusseldorf.
Yeah,
but
that's a fancy city. That's the fashion center of Germany.
But that would have been during World War II, so not probably the best time.
Well, I tell you what, after 1945, it was just desolate here, and every major city was bombed flat. And they actually formed the country, the Federal Republic of Germany, in 1949, and those were hard years. And but hey, they started it twice and they lost twice.
Well, I wonder, like, I think about our history here in the States, and I think about going to high school and what they taught us in history class. And of course,
Yeah,
America always comes out well in the history classes. And
yeah.
we've had a few rough years over here, and I wonder how they're going to teach that. How do they teach World War II in schools, or do they just ignore it?
I didn't pay much attention, but I read a lot, and I'm pretty well read in history and religion and natural sciences and this and that. I didn't go to college or anything. I left at 17 and hitchhiked up to start a rock band.
Mhm.
The last day of high school in June of 71.
Mhm.
And I mean, we lived so much history. Like we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was 9,
Yeah. Mhm.
and we all thought the bomb was going to drop, and in America, and and the 60s were crazy. We had 8 assassinations, with King and
Yeah.
Malcolm X and the Kennedys, and just unbelievable. Kent State, the National Guard came in and shot students for protesting the Vietnam debacle. Crazy, wild times. Half the reason I was really interested in Europe is because I hated Vietnam, and I dodged the draft. I actually got drafted and
Oh,
dodged it with
wow.
a note from a very liberal doctor. At the last second too, I was inducted and everything, and then they came in and
Wow.
said, in New Haven, Connecticut, we were living in Connecticut, and
Mhm.
is there anybody here that thinks that they have a reason to be exempt? And I had this letter. I said, sir, and so, I mean,
Wow.
I don't know how much I know. I kind of remember what was in the letter, but it would disqualify me for high office.
Mhm. It's amazing. I tend to think a lot about how one little moment in time can completely change the course of your life.
Yeah,
And that right there is one of them. I mean, if you didn't have that letter in your pocket
I would
or,
have gone. I
you
would
know,
have gone to Canada. My mom was right behind me, and so was my dad. I would never, ever, ever go to Vietnam.
that's what my
To
grandfather said. He told me because he fought in World War II for America, and he said if it ever came down to a draft, I would take you and your brother, and we would be over the border that night.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
You can't do that anymore. But this was
no,
50 years ago, and
yeah,
you could go to Canada. Now you can't go to Canada. If you
right.
got a DUI, they won't let you in.
Mhm.
And
Well,
everything's in the computer and all this. But
what's interesting is after the movie Saving Private Ryan came out, and of course, my grandfather had long passed before that.
yeah,
I was watching the movie and I called my grandmother and I said, I'll leave it up to you whether you want to watch this movie or not because it's
yeah,
pretty graphic and
yeah,
and she said that reminds me I have an article to send you. So a few days later in the mail, I get a newspaper clipping from her and it's a picture of these soldiers and the heading said soldiers getting ready to board the boats to go to Normandy.
yeah.
And
Sure.
smack
D-Day.
in the middle of that photograph was my grandfather.
Wow.
And
But
then I,
did he survive that?
yeah, oh
Because
yeah.
the first few waves, man, the landing boats were tipping over, they're drowning in all their gear, and then they have to
Mhm.
get on Omaha Beach or whatever. They had several
Yeah.
beaches,
Mhm.
and there was just withering machine gun fire, and it was like suicide. I mean, it's walking
Oh
suicidal,
yeah.
but it had to be done. Now,
Yeah. But in that
you mentioned
moment,
that.
I,
Well, that was the last good war. I mean,
right.
we had a maniac that was several maniacs that were going to take over the world. We had Hirohito, and we had Adolf, and we had
Mhm.
Stalin, and okay, we made a pact of necessity with Stalin, but the Axis was they were dangerous. It's really possible we'd all be speaking German today. I mean,
Yeah.
I am speaking German today, but
Right. Yeah.
you would be speaking German today. So
Right.
that's like a justified war. We were attacked.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't a war for oil. It wasn't a
Mhm.
war to stop the spread of communism. I mean, who gives a shit?
Yeah. It
Like,
wasn't about a piece of dirt or anything like that. It was
yeah,
literally survival of the world at that point.
yeah. But in Vietnam and in Korea was right after that,
Mhm.
and that was kind of stopped the spread of communism. But although China came over and invaded Korea, and so we went there, and it was My dad didn't serve in either of them. He was exemptions for both. He was too young for World War II, and he had 3 kids by Korea. So, he was exempted. I mean, if everybody was doing it, I might have done it because they made some sense. But starting with, well, the ones you never hear about, and then in the mid-60s, Vietnam escalation. I mean, we're dropping napalm on children over there, you know, and Agent Orange to try to defoliate a jungle can't be done.
Right.
It wasn't done. We lost.
Mm-hmm.
And remember the fall of Saigon? I don't know how old you are, but the Saigon, all the people trying to grab onto the last helicopter leaving the embassy, and pretty much like what happened in Afghanistan recently, and just horror, awful, and for nothing. We gained nothing, and millions of people were displaced and murdered. In my opinion, 55,000 American kids.
Yeah.
The majority of them poor Southerners, actually, that didn't have. I don't mean the officer class. I mean enlisted the draftees that didn't have liberal mothers who knew psychiatrists. You know.
Yeah.
And wow.
I think I'll just never understand. I get when people are insane that they're going to do things that are insane, but I'll never understand just the inhumanity of it all.
Cruelty, how cruel it is. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. I'm 51, so I have not been of draft age. There was some concern during the Gulf War that it might come to that, but I've never been in that position, thankfully.
Were they talking about a draft for the Gulf War?
Oh yeah.
Well,
there's always rumors anytime anything's going on, which now is every day, pretty much.
Yeah, sure.
You know,
sure. And I think the enlistment numbers are way down, because at least the Gulf War they were professional soldiers. They were there because they wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And they trained and they were dedicated and they had a chance. But you pull a kid out of the backwoods of Alabama and send him over to a jungle and give him some basic training, and then there's these little men in black pajamas and rubber shoes made out of tires who just walked all over them, you know, basically. And
well, even if you gave them solid training, there's a lack of experience. There's that, you know, in the moment, what happens. You can be as prepared as you want, and if you're not ready to fire on somebody in that second that you have to do it, and there's a lot of drugs taken in Vietnam. Oh, I'm sure. I mean, that's the golden triangle. I mean, you get all the heroin you wanted and all the weed you wanted, and a lot of the troops were high, and war was a joke. I could never understand it. Yeah. The good thing about Germany is they know exactly how fucked up all that was, and it's illegal here to give that Hitler salute or display a swastika. It's illegal. You can get a fine. Right. You won't go to jail, but you get in trouble. Yeah. It's not legal, and that's about the only thing that's illegal is showing any solidarity with what happened in the 30s and 40s on that end. And otherwise, it was quite a liberal country, and everything works really smooth. It's not socialism here. You know, I pay for my health insurance. You know, it's not like France or England or Norway, or that's all like completely free. It's taxpayer money, but it's completely free. That you never get a doctor bill. I don't get a doctor bill either, but I pay. It's based on your income, but you know, I pay. Well, that's one thing about musicians is that there's no real pool for having benefits like that, like healthcare and stuff. Whereas actors, in some situations, can get that. Anybody's self-employed, first of all, and anybody in the entertainment industry. So anyway, and you know what pissed me off? Jimmy Bain died. Yeah, and he was my best friend in Rainbow. We were buddies, and he was 6 years older than me. He died at 69 of undiagnosed lung cancer. Yeah. And that's just wouldn't happen here. I get checkups, you know, and he obviously didn't have health insurance like so many people. I guess he had a green card because he was living in America for years in Southern California, but he didn't ever go to the doctor. Oh.
And I mean, maybe the lung cancer would have killed him anyway, but it was undiagnosed. They found it in the autopsy, and that's disgusting. That's barbarous, and I have a hard time getting my head around that.
No, I'm with you. And there's always the debate about whether we're going to go socialized here or not. I
It's
think
not socialism. That's the point.
Well, right. But I think there's
socialism is something else, but okay.
They can't charge what they charge for medication if they do that, if it's all regulated. And, that's a huge part of the industry here.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised that you haven't written a book. I feel like you would be a really good author.
I would have been an author if I hadn't been a songwriter or a marine biologist. I would have been an author. I tell you what, you specialize. There are a Japanese haiku poet. There's really strict rules in haiku. It's like 11 words.
Right.
Some are 7 words. These people will work half a year on a haiku.
Yeah.
And then there's songwriting, which is 2 or 3 verses, a pre-chorus, and then a chorus, where it's so condensed that every word counts. And I didn't start off as a really good lyricist, but I developed into a really good lyricist. And it's like any other discipline, writing a novel or a memoir. That's you got to put your 10,000 hours into something, including long form literature. And I'm not going to write a book. I never would, because I'm not good at. I'm not practiced at it. I never tried to write long form. I did hone the 4-minute rock song into in my songs. Then there's some that I cringe when I hear them. So the earlier ones, but in my songs, every word is in the right place. And there's one, and none of them are cliches. That's 2. That's cliche alert. Or superfluous syllable. It's got to fit, and that takes 10,000 hours.
Yes, it does.
I published 1,200 songs.
Wow.
In since 1978, since I started writing 79, and that's 45 years, 46 years, whatever it is, and 1,200 songs is a lot.
It is,
and I mean, there's people that have published 3,000 songs. That's a real lot. But a long way around your question about writing a book, I found the form that I wanted to be good at and did my 10,000 hours, which you have to do at anything.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fair. I think you have some great storytelling abilities, whether you would have the ability to
turn your hair white.
Out.
Turn your hair white if you had any.
If I had any, yeah. One of your first, or maybe it was your first band, I'm not sure. You were doing a lot of covers of the Mamas and the Papas. Is that right?
No, that was okay. That was my first band. I was 11.
Wow.
So, living at mom and dad's, of course. And I had a guitar. I didn't play keyboards. And I had an acoustic guitar, and we do California Dreamin'. And then and whatever they were doing, if you're going to San Francisco, all that stuff. And then later, on my 14th birthday, I got an organ, and not a Hammond organ, not an expensive organ, a little home console unit we didn't have a lot of money. And after that, I was gone. After that, I learned the first things I learned was the first 2 Doors albums, because they were organ dominated, and Vanilla Fudge stuff, all the stuff that had, organ on it. And me and my brother and I, we always were mechanically minded, took everything apart. We figured out how to, this thing had these little dinky speakers, and it sounded awful. But we figured out a way to get directly from the amplifier section to a jack where you could plug the guitar cable in and put it into a guitar amplifier. Okay. And that thing screamed like a banshee. It must have been such an awful sound, but I was happy because it was loud.
Right.
And and our show was like, play all the Doors, all the songs from the first 2 Doors album, then play them again. So that was That's
I gotta say
I was
though,
a sophomore in high school. Yeah.
were you singing backups with the Mamas and Papas stuff?
I always sang, and in my real first group, after I left school with two guys. One of them was Michael Mugridge, who played with Orleans for several years.
Okay.
And then we found a lead singer up in New Hampshire, and we were in Connecticut. We hitchhiked up and we started a band, and I played bass and electric piano, and they both played guitars, and we all sang. Now we had a lead singer, but we were like Crosby, Stills and Nash. We had 3-part harmony. In high school, though, I had a rhythm and blues group with some famous people that turned out to be famous. Neil Steubenhaus was the bass player. He played with Barbra Streisand, and he played with a million big bands, and he's the president, or was, of the Musicians Union in Los Angeles.
Okay.
So I mean, he had a career in music as well. And we would do Wilson Pickett, rhythm and blues stuff, James Brown stuff, and I was the lead singer for that, and I loved that.
I could hear that with your voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And we got we got a record deal. We got found a guy that financed some demos of our songs, and ABC Dunhill gave us, in today's money, it would be millions. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it was in 1973, but all I was interested in is, wow, we got a record deal. And this was 2 years out of high school, and so we were good for sure, but we were lucky, and that's just as important as just to be in the right place at the right time. There's a lot of people that are good. Yeah, there's a lot of talent, and a lot of charisma, and there's a lot of everything. Mm-hmm. But they're stuck in Boise, and nobody's ever going to find them. Right. And we were in Westport, Connecticut, which is right next to New York City, where the record companies were. Mm-hmm. And we'd found a guy, and they took us out to LA, to Hollywood, West Hollywood. And I lived we lived for 7 months in a bungalow at the Chateau Marmont Hotel. That's the hotel where John Belushi died, and all the movie star, legendary hotel, mm-hmm. right on Sunset Strip. Mm-hmm. And the problem was, now this is 1973, 4. They gave us the wrong producer. The ABC Dunhill doesn't exist anymore, but they gave us Gary Katz, who produced Steely Dan, mm-hmm. and completely wrong producer. He was notorious for not changing members, but changing groups. He'd have for every Steely Dan album, there's 5 different takes with 5 session guys. I mean, new guys every time, and it's just like, you wonder, am I going to be on the album? And all the versions are great. The first thing he did was fire our bass player and drummer, or had him fired, and hire guitar players for the 2 guitar players. And so we had Jeff Porcaro on drums. Whoa. And his brother Mike on bass, Dean Parks, Skunk Baxter, Lee Sklar, all these top. Yeah, but we couldn't get anything recorded, and that would please Gary Katz. I liked the guy, but he ruined us, and we weren't going anywhere. We were there for 2 years and didn't have anything on tape, and we were in Village Recorders, Sound City. I mean, these huge name studios, and spending all this money and just not getting anything. And so we're rehearsing with Jeff and Porcaro on drums and Mike on bass, and us 3, the 2 guitar players and me. I'm playing Hammond. Mm-hmm. We're working out new material at SIR Sound Stage in Hollywood, and talk about moments that change your trajectory. And Richie was 2 doors down in another rehearsal studio looking for keyboard players, because he had everybody else. He had Ronnie and Cozy and Jimmy, and he had 100 keyboard players come in and threw them all out. I didn't like any of them. Yeah. And heard my Hammond. I was not shy. He heard my Hammond somebody heard it anyway, through about 10 walls, sent Jimmy over to ask me if I wanted to audition for Rainbow. Mm-hmm. And I knew exactly what Rainbow was. Man on a Silver Mountain had been out, and it was huge in LA anyway. And of course, California Jam, and it was on TV, and that great Guitar Smash and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I'll do that. But had we been making any progress at all I mean, I had a record deal, you know, and but if we'd made any progress in the 2 years attempting, then it never would have happened. You know, I would said, no, I can't, you know, I got commitments. But as it was, I was completely, yeah, let's do it. I'm out of here. I'm done with this shit.
Well, let me ask you though, working with Jeff Porcaro, did you get the inclination at that time that he would go on to become the famous drummer that he did?
He already was, man. He was the top LA session guy, and that's as top as you get.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not household name famous or whatever, but that's from your peers. That's the most respect you'll ever get, you know.
Yeah.
He was doing 4 sessions a day, and a session, a union session in LA is 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And he was doing 3 or 4 sessions a day. Him and Steve Lukather and David Page, and David Hungate, the guys that put Toto together. Mm-hmm. They were all over town. Jeff, I think, had 3 drum kits and 3 separate guys to go to the next studio with a new drum kit to set it up, waiting for him to come over across town. And so he was already like one of the guys. And you know, he played on Steely Dan, played Boz Scaggs, played that beautiful Boz Scaggs record. Mm-hmm. That was basically Toto.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I had an inkling that he sweated charisma. I mean, he was amazing groove master. And he was younger than I was, and I was 19. He was only 16 at 17, I think.
To have that position at that age, that's just insane.
You don't appreciate it. I never appreciated any of it. It all seems organic, natural. Of course, I'm here. You know, of course I can play this music. I can play it in my sleep, and because but Jeff had Joe Porcaro was famous or well known and certainly well respected as a percussionist and drummer, and Marty Page, who was David Page's dad, was a well respected. I guess he did film music, and so all these kids came from they're born connected, you know.
Right.
So they were, and they were all within 25 minutes of where the studios were.
Oh yeah, you gotta be.
You gotta be. And so, but you know, when things like that happens, like the first time I was, Fine Fine Day was #1 in rock radio. Mm-hmm. And my feeling, I was a kid, and I wasn't like a cocky type thing. I just, well, of course it is. It's the best song out this week. I mean, yeah, it's things just go by you. It's called life. And you know, it is 40 years later now, I'm 70. I think about, well, that was something, wasn't it? But I didn't think so at the time. It just felt natural at the time.
Right. Well, you had a pretty good solo career even back in the early 80s. I mean, you had some hits, 7, I think, that charted?
7 that charted, 2 were top 40, 5 were top 10 in the rock chart, the AOR chart, and that was actually the most important chart, radio chart. No, I mean the most important chart, of course, is the pop chart, but
sure, yeah.
But the one that we were looking at as most impressive was the radio chart. Mm-hmm. And all of those songs from the 80s are still on classic rock radio. And basically Keep the Lights On here are half of them, and this is 40 years later.
Isn't that amazing though, that music is so timeless when it comes to certain things feel dated, like short eras, like say disco feels really dated when you hear it, but good rock and roll, good pop music, that stuff feels really timeless. And I can tell you,
so does good disco. I mean, Chic or the Bee Gees. I hated that stuff when it first came out. I thought that was just like, I was like rock and roll purist. Right. But today when I hear it, I said, man, are those well-made records. Those records, Excuse me, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I could tell you, growing up in Detroit, we had we had quite a variety of radio stations there, and there wasn't a day that went by that I didn't either hear Vigilante or I Won't Be Home Tonight or Why Me. I mean, you were there. You were very present in the radio, and I love that.
I was for 82, 3, 4 and a half of 5, and actually 81. I had my first record came out there. I tell you what, I found out. If your next question is where did I go, I moved to. I'd been in Germany since '78. I came over here just to make a record as a studio guy. I played piano on somebody's record, and I loved it. And I stayed, and I started found a guy with a studio, and started spending 24 hours a day in the studio, and then I got a record deal, and as happens, if you put your 10,000 hours in, and you know the right people. So I was on MTV, like heavy rotation in '82, whenever it started, late '82, 3 and 4, with Some Tough City, Fine Fine Day, Why Me, Static, 6 or 7 big videos. And MTV didn't have a backlog of 1 million videos. They had 30 videos, and they played them. Fine Fine Day was on 4 times a day. And I hated that then. I didn't like that much attention. I really didn't. What I liked was making records. And so I spent 4 years traveling to America and then back home and everything, but I had young children here. Touring was such an enormous hassle, because I did one tour. We went from Miami to Anchorage, Alaska in 112 days, and we played 110 concerts.
Holy crap.
Me and my band. Yeah.
That's busy.
You can do that when you're a kid, but you know.
Did you feel some burnout though with that heavy of touring, or is it like, hey, if I'm going to be out, I might as well play?
As a kid, I didn't even have that justification. I just said, well, it feels organic. It feels like something, it feels like it's happening in real time, and nobody's getting hurt.
Well, as you were playing to some of the bigger crowds, as Rainbow was kind of gaining momentum, was it intimidating to go and play in front of a big group of people?
Intimidating is to play in front of 20 people. To play in front of 20,000 people or 100,000 people. They're an oil painting. You're on stage, and it's a high stage, and there's always this pit, and then there's the fences that people can't run. The closest person's going to be to you is going to be 15 yards away, good, at least 10 yards away from you. And they'd have to be Spider-Man to get up on stage. So you kind of give them the 1,000-yard stare. And it's like I was pretending an oil painting. I never ever had a bit of stage frighting or anything, and thank goodness, because I mean, people like Adele, she gets stage fright. She throws up and a bundle of nerves and this and that. I'm sorry for the girl, because she certainly doesn't need to. She's brilliant, but it wasn't one of anything that ever afflicted me. I actually call it my gig switch. I have a switch in my head that I actually wake up when I'm on stage. I come to life. I mean, I play my best on stage and never make a mistake. Very, very, very rarely. And in rehearsals, I'll make mistakes and stuff. But when you're concentrated and they're there, then I keep coming back to this word organic. Things can't feel contrived. They have to feel like they're from song lyrics to performing to who you're working with. It has to feel like this moment is right. That's the way. Or like to be number 1 in the rock charts felt right. And I don't say that with I'm not boasting at all.
I get it.
But organically, it felt right. Everybody told me this is a great song. Look how much radio it's getting. I knew it was a good song. And I said, okay, that feels right. So.
But I think that's part of the magic of the music from the 70s and early 80s, especially, is because before we had all the technology that we do now, you had to be able to play your instrument. You had to be able to write songs, and you didn't have these formulas of this is how you write a pop song and that. It was very natural, honest music. And I think that's part of the attraction to that era, because I don't feel like we have that anymore.
You don't have that anymore. I mean, there's a lot of talent. There's always going to be a lot of talent. I mean, you get people, Taylor Swift with her $1 billion tour, that doesn't come from nothing. She appeals to hundreds of millions of people, and all the names, the big names. And I'm not conversant with hip hop. I couldn't name the players, except for the obvious ones, Dre or Jay-Z or Eminem. I know them, but I don't know anybody else.
Yeah.
But these guys sell 150 million streams, and they're playing in arenas. That's talent. I mean, it doesn't matter. Now, what happens in the studio, the laptop I'm talking to you on is a studio. And if I had a master keyboard here and one microphone, I could make you a record that sounds like any rap record or any Taylor Swift record, for that matter.
Sure.
With software instruments and one good microphone and some instruments, and you got to learn. You got to put your hours in on the software. That you have to learn how to engineer, which I did. And as soon as I could, like I was in my 30s.
The more you can do yourself and have to depend on other people less, the better off you are.
Yeah, but the 70s and 80s, there's a great Tom Petty story, and I told you how Gary Katz at ABC Dunhill, but basically Gary Katz killed my first band to get a record deal. Tom Petty came just a couple years later, I think 76, and I guess they worked with Ted Templeman. I guess it was Warner Brothers. I think Ted Templeman was a producer, well-respected producer. And he says, we did 100 takes of Breakdown, whatever the first big hit, I think, was Breakdown. And that's exactly what my band needed, is to go in a studio and learn how to record. That's how you're supposed to know that.
Right.
But in my case, the producer says, you guys don't have to do anything. And he makes phone calls and all these top names show up. And first of all, that gives the band a really generic sound, because they're on half of the top 30.
Right.
These same guys, all comes from the same place. And secondly, and most harmfully, the band never learns how to work in the studio environment, which you need to do.
Yes.
And so I heard this. I was so jealous. I heard Tom Petty said, "Yeah, we did 100 takes of Breakdown, and until he was satisfied, playing together as a band." Right. And then they do the lead vocal later, just scratch vocal, but then they'd overdub the lead vocal and overdub some guitars, overdub some keyboards, whatever. But they'd get the track, the groove, the drums, the vibe. They get that in a take, and it took them 100 takes, which is probably a week in the studio, right? Or 5 days or whatever it is, more a week. And he learned his trade. Yeah. With that kind of producer.
So that's the only way you're going to, is to just get in there and do it,
Yeah, right. Yeah. Unless you got some guy who thinks he's the smartest guy in the room that says, nah, let's call the Wrecking Crew, like the Beach Boys did. Let's call Carol Kay to play bass, and I was 10 years later, so let's call Lee Sklar to play bass. And
I was going to say, it's kind of the same thing as the Wrecking Crew, right? Because that's why so much of that music sounds so much the same.
Right. Exactly. It's exactly right. Exactly right. And and the thing is, it's not like we couldn't. We got the record deal because we had some charm, obviously. Yeah. I mean, somebody put a lot of money down, signed us to an exclusive recording deal. So we were like, that's a plateau. You start from nothing in the rehearsal room, and then you get signed to a major label. That's a big plateau. Yeah. But the next plateau is doing the first album. And the hardest plateau is following it up with another album. Yes. Because after the first one you're doing songs you might have written when you were 10, and you got this big cat. But the second one, there's songs that you've written since the first one. It's not as much time. You've been out on the road promoting it. It's much more. The sophomore record is much more pressure. Everybody's looking at you with this, can I be able to do it or not? So
I always look at Guns N' Roses as the example of that. They had written Appetite for Destruction. They'd been playing those songs forever. And then all of a sudden the record company's like, hey, you guys are a big success. Let's get another record going right now. Yeah. And they're like, wait a minute, this took us a long time to put together. That's a whole nother world of pressure.
Yeah, you bet it is. Richie tells the story that he hated this interview he gave in the 60s, or maybe 1970, right around Made in Japan time, maybe 72 even.
72, yeah.
And he said, we're successful and we're not playing clubs anymore or theaters. We're playing, big shows, and they want us to tour, and then they want a record. And he said a band needs at least a year for a record. Just quoting Richie from 1972. And I say a band needs 2 years for a record if they're gonna promote it. And he made the suggestion. This is actually pretty funny. He didn't like America in those days. The distances were too great, and he probably didn't like the people that much, or whatever. He didn't like the record executives. He said, "I'll play guitar for Europe, and you get somebody else to do America for Deep Purple," which is hilarious. And
could you even imagine?
Yeah.
That
what didn't go down well, but he meant it.
Yeah.
He really meant it. He says, I'll do England, I'll do Europe, I'll do Japan, great, but get somebody else from America.
And of course, now he lives in New York, which is the funny part. Well, let me ask you one question about Rainbow. The two albums that obviously you're most noted for are Rising and On Stage.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, you mentioned Man on the Silver Mountain. For me, that song came alive on the On Stage version. There was so much energy in that song that I really feel the album was definitely a different, lacking version for me.
All of Rainbow Studios recordings were unfortunately clinical, and that one especially, his first album that he made with the Elf guys, especially. I mean, had cool things going on and this and that, but it was about half the tempo of the live version. And on the one hand, everything we played was too fast. I mean, everything. Cozy was it was Cozy egging Richie on, and Richie egging Cozy on, and the Kill the King was like double speed, and I've heard versions of Stargazer that were like double the speed, and that deep groove from the record from Rising just isn't there.
Right.
So that's a mixed blessing, but as far as energy goes, just raw energy, because the fan and bought the ticket and bought the T-shirt and has the album and just can't. This is because there's no MTV or there's no social media. Has very little information except what he reads in Cream magazine, as we discussed earlier. So he doesn't care how fast the song is. He just feels the atom bomb exploding on stage.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that band had amazing energy. When the five of us would play something, it was never less than very energetic.
Oh yeah, and I can tell you, I memorized every note from your playing on Still I'm Sad, especially from the On Stage album, because it's just the feeling of it is really amazing. It's a whole journey that you take us on that song.
Well, I was the prog guy, of course. I mean, that's completely prog, and that's what made the band a little bit different than, say, Iron Maiden. They were later anyway, or Judas Priest. They were later too. I mean, the prog touch, and I never played the same thing twice ever in my life. And if you'd heard the next night, it would have been a completely different solo. I've heard about 5 different versions of that of the 76 tour. One of them is on stage, which is cut from several shows.
Right. And
one of them's live in Nuremberg. It's just the Nuremberg show. One of them's from somewhere else. One of them's from Paris, whatever. And I never played this even close to the same thing twice. It was all about improvisation.
But see, that's the beauty
I'm
of
glad
live
I'm glad you liked it, but I have no idea what I did. That's what I'm saying.
But that's what I don't like about the idea of people playing to tracks now, is that you're missing that spontaneity. You don't have the ability to really just expand on anything. David Stone, when I interviewed him, he told me that in the middle of a show, Richie would send his roadie over to say, "You got a 20-minute solo coming up, get ready." And just like that, did he do that kind of stuff to you?
Yeah. I mean, well, actually, Richie fired me on stage. He fired me 3 times, and couldn't find anybody, and came back. And had I been older and more experienced, I would have said no thanks. I'll do something else. But I was 21, He had fired me on stage in England somewhere, and
Wow.
I don't know why. He'd had a couple. He'd drink. We would drink. We weren't a druggy band, but we would drink.
Right. Yeah.
And he was just in a shitty mood. He came over in the middle of a song and said, "Why don't you just go home then?" So I'm way too proud. I said, "Good, see ya." Went back to the hotel, packed up, got a plane ticket.
Wow.
And then the rest of the band came and said, they're all panicked because we're in the middle of this world tour.
Yeah.
And we reached an agreement, and I ended up not leaving. But
wow.
I tell you, I fuck up my musicians. I got a new drummer about 12 years ago in my band. My musicians, my band are the Norwegian guys. Mm-hmm. I love Norway. I love Norwegian people. I love the culture. They're cowboys. They're rough and ready. And my drummer, you know how drum solo is always toward the end.
Right.
And second show we played, after the first song, I said, "On the drums," and I said his name, and he just did his drum solo. But just to fuck him up. I was joking,
right.
but I wasn't joking because I knew he could do it.
Of course,
I said, let's have some fun. Who cares? And they fucked me up. We're in the middle of something. One of my songs, Blue Highway, or one of my songs, which has an arrangement, and all of a sudden it's reggae. And they'll give each other a nod behind my back, and all of a sudden it's complete reggae, like it could be in Kingston, Jamaica.
Wow.
And so I gotta go with it. It's funny. It's hilarious.
But it makes it fun too. It's not just playing the same set every night. And so one last question about Rainbow. One thing I'm very curious about is when we talked about Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, the first album was very dry and studio sounding.
Yeah.
Rising is very lush. I mean, that album just sounds huge. There's not a lot of open space in it. Very much like Burn. Burn was another album that I think was just huge sounding. Was that a conscious effort to make it sound that way, or did that just happen?
Nothing was conscious. First of all, at least from my side, I'm oblivious. So let's take that as the starting point. Okay. What anybody else's game plan might have been, I have no clue. I'm oblivious. Okay. We did Rising in 15 minutes. I mean, it was in and out. We had a couple of unnecessary rehearsals. We didn't need them. In a freezing cold farmhouse outside of Munich. I know where it is now. I didn't then. That was my first time in Germany. And everybody was wearing like sheepskin coats and playing. We were completely unnecessary. Then we went right into Musicland Studios, which is Giorgio Moroder's studio, where he did like Donna Summer and all that.
Yeah.
But then who'd been there? Queen had been there. The Stones had been there. It was kind of an in place. And it was in the basement of a hotel. So you could live there, just take the elevator down to the studio, and it's very practical. And I think it flew by. I mean, we were there. I was there 14 days at the most. And I think I played like 3 of them, and, we got to beat the jet lag. And then we did some rehearsing that we didn't need to do. And then we just went in and did it. Ronnie took longer because as you know, the Stargazer is a spectacular piece of songwriting, and the melody, I could take issue with some of the Wizard and Dragons lyrics. That's just a subjective taste question. I wouldn't write that, but whatever. Ronnie did write that, and he wrote it for that genre perfectly. But the vocal is astounding, and the guitar solo, the slide guitar solo, it's astounding. And Ritchie did that alone with Martin Birch. And Ronnie did his vocals after we'd all gone home with Ritchie and Ronnie and Martin Birch. So that probably took longer. Maybe that took an extra week.
Yeah.
Who knows?
And then when were the strings brought in?
I wasn't there. And by the way, you don't hear the strings. That's me. I played. They're there. I can hear them like sawing away. But I know the problem with orchestras. Orchestras are always behind the beat. The conductor's doing this, and the orchestra's somewhere back there, and these straight guys, Munich Philharmonic, are playing something that's actually way easier and just spaced than Tchaikovsky's symphony. Right. And they're doing it for the money, and they're behind the beat, and there was no Pro Tools. You couldn't speed them up. You couldn't. And I heard stories about the mixing. It was almost an orchestral song. and then bit by bit they take the orchestra out. The orchestra's there in the last 2 minutes of the fade. The rest is I had a string machine that sounded pretty much like an orchestra, and I had a orchestron which sounded like a mellotron. It's a mellotron that used floppy disks.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, there was only a few of them made, and I had one because Richie bought it, and I'd use it on stage. That's why there's not very, very much orchestra in Stargazer.
Interesting. I did not know that. But you're right. They always are a little bit behind. And nowadays you would just take that clip and you would just shift it just enough to lock it into the beat, right?
Yeah. Or you do it at Abbey Road with the LSO, London Symphony Orchestra, who do pop sessions every day now.
Right.
At that time, it was almost unheard of, like, and this, we're talking nearly 50 years ago, or 47 years ago, or whatever it is, 48 years ago almost. And it wasn't an everyday thing. Well, let's call it orchestra. And when they say orchestra, I have no idea how many pieces, but it was only strings. I mean, I don't hear any brass. I don't hear any brass.
4 or 6 guys, just coming in and maybe doing a couple of passes. But
I mean, I don't hear French horns. I don't hear woodwinds. That's an orchestra.
You wouldn't ever hear a woodwind in that song. It would never cut through everybody else. Yeah, but both of those albums are interestingly our Christmas albums for me, because we got them, as we were discovering Rainbow's back catalog, because I learned of them from Straight Between the Eyes. So going into the back catalog, we got those.
Who sang that one? Was that Joe or Graham?
That was Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Graham was on Down to Earth, and only that album. But
we're all buds. We're all friends. Me and Joe, Graham, Doogie.
Oh yeah.
We're all buds. Yeah, we see each other as often as we can. Yeah.
Yeah, I had lunch with Graham a couple years ago when I went to LA for the NAMM show. Yeah. And he and Bethany and Conrad, who's their guitar player for the Grand Bonnet Band, such wonderful people.
It's great. Great. And Doogie and his wife and I were in Warsaw last year for a show that was kind of a tribute to John Lord, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And I got to spend 2 great days with Doogie, and I was in a band with Joe for about a month. We called it Over the Rainbow.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't last. I got cancer. I mean, in 2009. So I couldn't do it. I did one tour. I did tour of Russia. Then I got sick and, couldn't do it. But Joe's a great guy. I love Joe. I love all these guys. Greg Smith is a Bobby Rondinelli. I talked to him this week. These guys they're great guys. The X-Rainbow, there's about 112 of us.
I talked to Bobby a couple of times back in the MySpace days. That tells you how long ago that was. Really nice guy. Yeah. How are you feeling now? How are you doing these days?
I'm great. I'm old. One thing, I'm old for sure. I mean, I'm really getting old. I'm 70. I never thought I'd be 70, so I'm happy to be 70.
Yeah.
I work. I have all the work I can handle, and I play with a couple of huge acts, and we tour. You won't know either of them, but an act I play with, it's called Mandoki Soulmates, and it's been 30 years. And this guy Leslie Mandoki is the band leader, and it's a revolving musical collective. Right now we have Randy Brecker, Richard Bona, Corey Henry, Al Di Meola, Mike Stern, me, Till Brunner. You don't know him, he's a genius trumpet player, and just top people. And in the band, since I've been in the band, we had Jack Bruce till he died. We had Greg Lake till he died.
Wow.
With Chaka Khan, we had a Spice Girl, Mel C.
I love Greg Lake. Absolutely love his voice. Al Di Meola. I mean, what an amazing. He's astounding. He sits right next to me on stage too. And then right behind me is Randy Brecker. I mean, God on trumpet, and it's a tough life, isn't it?
And a dear friend. And so we're all friends. So I do this. This is a project of Mandoki Soulmates. Google it. It's on YouTube. There's videos, and we play for like 30, 40, 50,000 people, and we play for governments.
Wow.
Like we're playing in Berlin in August, Germany here, and in front of the Brandenburg Gate, and that's the won't tell you anything if you don't know your history, but that was the dividing line between East and West Germany.
Right. Yeah.
And we're playing there, and then there could be 500,000 people there. It's not ticketed, it's free. We play for governments, like I say.
Sure. Yeah.
And we play Budapest every year for 30 to 50,000 people, and it's on their national holiday. It's not ticketed. You know, anybody can come who wants to. We're playing in Munich it's called the Residence. It's where the king used to live, and we're playing open air in front of this. These are all like 5-star, super comfortable, wonderful gigs, and we play 4 hours sometimes.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Because Al Di Meola won't shut up, and neither will Mike Stern. And you know, you're gonna tell Al Di Meola that?
Yeah, of course not. Right. Well, and I'll have that link in the show notes for you guys so that you can go check that out.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, as a songwriter, how do you decide when a song is done? When you're like, okay, I don't need to do
anything else. It's never done. A song is done when all the words work. A recording is never done. I tell you what, if I could, I'd go back and remix every album I ever made, and that's about 30 of my own, 10 greatest hits compilations, and about 50 that I produced for other people. If I had my way, I'd go remix them all starting now. The recording is never done. I mean, I think a painter has to, or an author has to feel exactly the same way. Oh, shit, why didn't I do, but a song is done when I can sing it. When I can sing it through the first demo vocal, I always work the same. I'll do a keyboard track, usually piano, with some kind of percussion, usually drum machine, and I'll work the vocal out, and I'll have scratch pads full of ideas, and I'll boil that down to its essence, and it'll take a day or take 2 days or whatever. And then I'll have that's a vocal. It sits in the song. There's no cliches, no alarm bells went off. It tells the story I wanted to tell. That's an art in itself. Writing a bridge is its own thing, because the bridge is 8 or 16 bars in the middle that have to actually sum up the story you're telling with verse 1 and 2, and then chorus, and the bridge has to be like a sidebar to that kind of wraps everything up. It's an art in itself. So that's when a song is finished.
Interesting. Now,
when a recording's finished, the answer is never. So.
Yeah, that's why I really have a hard time listening to my own stuff, because I'm like, oh, I should just put a little more EQ on here. I should just beef up this a little bit, and I can drive myself nuts doing that.
Oh man, truly nuts. Working under a deadline is a good thing.
It is.
Which I never have deadlines. If I did, I'd be more comfortable. Excuse me. I'd be more comfortable. I need a drink of water. 1 second. My last studio album that I released is Lucky Us. And it started off as a normal album. It had drums, had orchestration, it had guitars, had bass, had choirs. And what ended up is piano, my voice, and some orchestration out of the box, and a trumpeter plays on 2 songs, a real trumpet.
Very minimal synthesizer, just
That took me 4 years to make, because I kept thinking, I'll give you an analogy of the Japanese garden and the Japanese gardener. The Japanese gardener's job is not to add plants, it's to remove them. And he'll have this babbling brook, and the stones affect the tone of this Zen stuff. So what he'll accomplish in a day's work is move 2 stones and take 2 away. I mean, like complete your basic minimalism. And just like Japanese haiku poetry, they're limited to 11 words or whatever, or 7 words or 14. There are different forms. So once I decided, you know what, let's try Hawkeye Road with nothing. That's the first song on Lucky Us.
Right, yeah.
With nothing except my voice and some strings in the chorus. And I liked it. And I basically went through, it's like pulling teeth or murdering children. I basically took all these thousands of hours of overdubs and fiddly stuff out of it, until finally there's a little percussion on one song, a drum comes in the second verse of one song, but otherwise the whole album is piano and a vocal basically. Yeah. And took me so long. I mixed that so many times, and I personally think it's my best album, and so do a lot of people, because my shows, I'll play just guitar and piano and sing and tell stories. Mm-hmm. And they say, well, a lot of people like this record because it's like his shows. That's what he does. Right. It's just, it's just piano and things. So what are your two questions?
Well, I can tell you first, I've always loved your voice. Going back to the stuff that you were doing in the early 80s, I was like, God, I wish I had a voice like that, because you got just a little bit of grit in there, but you still sing really smooth. You tell a story very well. Yeah. When I heard Lucky Us, every song on that album, Tony, is unbelievable. Every one of them touches me in one way or another.
Thank you. It's the way I feel about it too. And I'm not boasting. This feels organic. That's one of the ones where I think no cliches. There's zero cliches. Mm-hmm. There are important topics to me, which means that out there somebody's going to relate to them. Mm-hmm. And they're all, I feel the same way about the album. Were you shocked that there's no drums and bass and guitar?
I wasn't sure what to expect. I always try and go into an album I've never heard with a very open mind. Like, I don't know what this is going to be, so I'm just going to listen and soak it in. But my favorite two were probably Hawkeye Road and Hallelujah, I'm Alive. Those two in particular really struck me. But the recording you got is amazing. The piano sounds just huge and rich, gentle at the same time. You did an amazing job capturing the sound of that piano.
It's not a piano. It's a computer program.
Damn it.
I mean, these are all, there's no real instruments on it except for my buddy, the trumpet player that played on the wind. Okay. And one other, but they're all virtual. They're called virtual instruments. Oh yeah. And like I said, well, I'm talking to your greater, to the public. Yeah. Like this laptop I'm talking to you on has got a full orchestra, 20 drummers, anything you want. If you can figure out how to work the software. So you just complimented me on the piano recording. It's not a piano recording. It's a sampled piano. It's just, the trick is to find the piano that fits the song.
Right. And native instruments are.
It's Steinberg and Piano Tech. There's a Piano Tech, and I have all of them actually, but it's one of those. I don't even remember, but that's where it comes in handy to learn how to engineer. Is to get the EQs, because I did not want it bright, and if I hear it back today, I don't think the vocal's loud enough. So recordings never finished. We heard one song in the car yesterday, my wife and I. I said, well, that's a great song. And I didn't recognize it. She said, it's you, idiot. I said, oh. And it was the one called All I Ever Wanted. And I said, well, turn it up. So she did. I said, the vocal's not loud enough. Turn it off. I could go remix it right now.
We're going to be our own worst critics when it comes to our work. There's no doubt about that.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no one else is going to come in and fix it for us, so it might as well be us.
You bet.
So my last question for you, and thank you so much for your time. It's just been so much fun talking to you. You have done some film scores, and
tons.
That is a whole different approach to songwriting. That's not, verse chorus. This is tempo maps and matching visuals. And do you find that an easy transition when you started? Or
it's very natural. I love it. We have one screen showing the director's rough cut. Mm-hmm. Another screen with actually I use Logic. I don't use Pro Tools, but it's a music software program, kids. Mm-hmm. And I have a master keyboard to control this, and it's just me and an engineer. I need an engineer. I can't do that by myself, so it's me and an engineer. There's too many things going on.
Yeah.
And actually watching the movie on his like a big 4K TV, and playing something that seems to fit, and then. To exactly the right length, So that's fine. So then we take the movie off, and I'll just flesh out the thing, because I know exactly where it's going. Right. I know exactly how long it's going to be, and I've got an idea. And then I'll do some more. Then let's see it with the film again. And that works. No, trumpet's no good. Yeah, now it works. That's why it's good. So there will be the first film I did. The second film I did was called Gefangen in Yemen, and it was which means a captive in Yemen.
Okay.
And it's my buddy Peter Maffay, who's a huge rock star, the biggest in Germany, and he, like people do, he made 2 feature films, and I did the music to both of them, and I think there were 70 copyrights on that. I mean, because some of them 15 seconds, some would be 3 minutes. About 3 of them are sung songs, actually 3 sung real songs, because we wanted a single, which we had, and then the rest of it was instrumental. But you don't bundle it into film music, Gefangen in Yemen. Each one of those is a copyright. It might not be 70, but it's 40 for sure. And well, that's one way to get to 1,200 songs a little quicker.
That's true.
Doing
I
a
can,
lot of film.
that's been my experience as well. I remember that the first one I did, you watch films and you think, oh yeah, I would probably do something like that. You watch Hans Zimmer or John Williams, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then when you get your first one and there's nothing there,
right?
That's
a blank piece of paper.
That's a little different. And you're like, oh shit, I have to do all that now.
Exactly right. Remember Interstellar?
Oh yeah.
I think that's my favorite. And I saw a documentary how Hans did it. Those are real pipe organs in real European cathedrals, and in England, I think he had one. And just amazing, just this whole thing, this Oscar-winning soundtrack is actually done on church organs, on pipe organs. And then then he went into with the orchestra a little bit, but it's mostly pipe organ from around the world. And fabulous. I love that.
It's nice when you have the budget to be able to do that kind of thing.
They don't do that much anymore. I have friends that were in the TV game. They would do TV series, and they make a lot of money. And these days, that's pretty much not the case. I mean, if you're Hans Zimmer, you get, and you have you doing a $200 million movie, you get money, of course.
Sure, yeah.
But just as a film composer, it's very, 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 very difficult, and it's changed. And there's so much license-free music available, or so many people that are willing to do a 90-minute film for $5,000, which is like $8 an hour. I mean, there's just so many people desperate and that take that job.
Yeah, it's a shame.
For the first movie I did was a Peter Maffay movie as a soundtrack. It was $250,000, and this is in the 80s, and that was not extravagant. That was a normal budget, and I have my own studio, and I bought the stuff I needed from that advance, and it's an advance. It wasn't a salary, because they released the record as a soundtrack, the CD. Yeah, so it was like a record deal, although they used it for the film. So you can't complain about the money. And I had a director that took everything. He only one time he said, "Can you do something like draw heavy drums here in this one action?" I said, "Yeah, sure." But other than he took everything. He wasn't one of these guys that says, "I don't like the cello." Nothing. He didn't care. He's just after the vibe, and that's your ideal situation for film.
That's pretty rare, by the way.
Really rare, really rare. And talking to colleagues that still do that, I was the right time in the right place, baby. 70s and 80s.
So what are you working on a new album or anything now?
I just finished the Soulmates album with Leslie, and we've got in fact, if you mailed me a couple of times, I've got your address. I'm going to send you a WeTransfer. It's mixed. It's been mixed for a week. It'll come out next April. I'll send it over to you. You won't believe this. And
that'll be fun.
We worked a year on it, and really old school budget, and you won't believe it.
I'm looking forward to this.
Other than that, no, I'm not really doing anything for myself. I don't really have anything to say. The world's really fucked up.
Yeah.
From me from here looking over there, and there's nothing I really want to say at the moment, but I'll be doing 3 tours this summer. Like I said, we'll get to China, we'll get to Santiago, Chile, and we'll do a few in Hungary and a few in Germany. And one guy's doing his farewell tour. This is my friend Peter Maffei, whom I did the 2 movies for.
Yeah.
He's doing his farewell tour. And he's 75. It's a real farewell tour.
Right.
And we're playing football stadiums, and
Jeez.
that'll be fun. And just you gotta keep putting one foot in front of the other,
So I think what you're saying, Tony, is that now that you're not working on anything, you got time to mix some old albums.
I hear that from my wife, and I hear that from everybody. Says, write a book, make a new record. Leave me alone.
If you're not inspired, that's the thing, though. If you're not inspired, it's not going to make you happy.
Sometimes I really feel like I got something to say, and just music for its own sake, like in the old days, to fulfill a contractual obligation, and you knew they were going to promote it, and it was going to be on MTV. That's its own motivation. You're doing it because for your career. But these days, there's 100,000 songs a day go on Spotify that nobody ever hears, and there's no record labels. And Sony, which is the biggest label here, Sony and Universal, Sony, 2024 will be the last year they produce any physical product, CDs, LPs, nothing. It's all streaming. And what Sony does, the rest are going to follow suit, and by 2027 or something, they just won't be making anything. There'll be little custom labels doing buying, licensing albums and pressing vinyl for sure.
Yeah.
But the CD is like history. It's gone. It had 40 years. It's gone. So one thing to get you motivated is the deadline. Deadlines are good.
Yeah.
And also the thought that maybe actually somebody will hear it. But anything I record and release today, like Lucky Us, nobody's going to hear that, and nobody has heard it, and nobody, I'm happy that it's there. It's like a legacy thing.
Yeah.
But nobody gave me a budget for it. I paid for it.
That makes me sad because it's such a great album. It really is. From start to finish.
Tell all your friends. It's called Lucky Us.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
I'm telling your audience.
Yeah.
It's called Lucky Us. It's by me. My name's Tony. It's on YouTube. It's on Spotify.
Yeah.
Cost you nothing. It's free.
And I always encourage people, I'll put the iTunes link in the show notes, because I always encourage people to buy albums from artists, because that's how artists stay artists.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of streaming. I think it's great to say, hey, this is what I've got. Now that you like it, please go buy my stuff.
Yeah. My father told me this when I was just a kid, something is worth what somebody else will pay for it.
Yeah.
And since like porn used to be expensive, now it's free.
Yeah.
Music used to be expensive, now it's basically free. And every song that is released is on YouTube, and for $9.99 a month you get a YouTube Premium, and there aren't even any ads. Yeah. So for $10 a month, $125 a year, whatever it is, you can get all your music for free, or Spotify Premium for absolute for free.
Yep.
So I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan either.
Yeah, or you can go to the link I put in the show notes, and for $10.99, I think it is, you can get the deluxe version of Lucky Us.
You bet.
But you know what? I will say this: have a tissue box at your side, because some of these songs, they might reach places.
Oh,
you never know. Tony, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been so great talking to you.
No, thanks for all the music. What time is it? What time is it? It's 4 a.m, right?
Yeah, it's about 3:22 here. Yeah. I still got a good half hour in me yet.
I remember those days. It's 12:22 here, and I'm gonna go eat lunch.
Wonderful. Well, you have a great day, my friend.
You too.
Thank you.
See you, kids. Bye-bye.